Hey guys, welcome back to Nyx Reads. Thank you so much for watching my videos and subscribing and liking them. If you haven't subscribed yet, then please feel free to do so if you enjoy bookish content like I do. This is my February wrap-up. I read 7 books in that month and 3 of them are non-fiction. Just like last month, you can stick to the end of the video to figure out how much money I saved by using my library card. I'm going to talk about the books from worst to best. I have one 5-star book that I'm going to talk about in the end. So the worst book I read with only 2 stars, and that's already pretty generous if I'm being honest, is a psychological thriller, a German one. It is available in English, but I read the German original. It's by Sebastian Fitzek. It's called Passenger 23. I picked this up on my recent trip to Germany and included it in the haul that I posted. You can watch that if you want. And Sebastian Fitzek is something like the German version of John Grisham, in a sense that he has a huge canon of books already and he keeps popping them out like nobody's business. And I always see these books around in the bookstores. They usually always make it onto the bestseller lists. Our protagonist in Passenger 23 is a police psychologist named Martin Schwarz, and he lost his wife and son about 5 years ago under very, very mysterious circumstances on a cruise ship. He has no private life whatsoever and is really jaded by the loss of his family. So already you have a very cliche protagonist, I would say. It's like the detective type who has issues in his personal life. Right off the bat, I had a very bad start with this book because in the introduction, so this is not a spoiler, case that he's working on is about sexual abuse, severe sexual abuse on children, which I was not expecting. I was surprised by that. There was no mention of that anywhere in the plot summary, and it kind of sets the tone for the book, which honestly, like I had a lot of moments where I was like, should I just DNF this book? And in hindsight, I should have. But in the end of the day, and I guess this is why I gave it 2 stars instead of 1, is I was still hooked enough to keep going because I really did in the end want to know what happened. So the main plot of this book is Martin going back to the exact same cruise ship where his wife and son disappeared because a previously girl that also disappeared suddenly reappears out of nowhere on that ship with his son's teddy bear in her arm. The writing is generally not that great. The prose is not of the highest quality. It reads very choppy, if that makes any sense, and it honestly feels like a male author having issues with writing female characters altogether too, because it's just one cliche after the other, and even the dialogues, they read very unnatural to a point where I felt like I was watching a not so great movie where the dialogues feel very campy, but not in a good way. And then there's the author's note in the end where I thought, okay, maybe this is the place where now the author will explain a bit more about, you know, why he chose to write about sexual assault on children, and especially that type of assault that is happening to the kids in the book. But he was not. He just went on to write about like what inspired him to write about cruise ship murders. I honestly do not recommend this book. Let me know if you read this and you found something positive in this book. I think I'm done with this author. It's just not for me. I gave it a try. Here we are. Next up, I read Making a Scene by Constance. I know this Asian American actress from Fresh Off the Boat and Crazy Rich Asians. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I want to emphasize that for pretty much any nonfiction, especially memoirs, my rating has nothing to do with the author's life or their choices. It's really just about the format of the literature, the writing. This is a collection of essays, I would call it, about her life. She talks about all different kinds of topics, about her family, about her relationships, her life in New York as a young aspiring actress. I enjoyed it fine. It's just that all of the chapters read like diary entries, which made them feel very intimate and personal. It was like I could really imagine the actress sitting there and writing everything herself and not having a ghostwriter to that point. But the other side of that is that the prose was not the best quality. I think that sometimes the lyricism that the author was trying to achieve, she didn't quite bring us there. I generally felt like this could have benefited a lot by more editing. That maybe this was a conscious decision of the author to leave it as raw as possible, and maybe she really wanted to have her own voice in there. But in the end, the writing was mediocre. My favorite essay is definitely the last one where she talks about her mother. That was very touching, very interesting. So in general, if you like this actress, if you've heard of her before and you're curious about her life and her experiences, I would still recommend it. It's just don't read it for very lyrical prose, I would say. Then I have another 3 stars. It's Taken at the Flood by Agatha Christie. This is part of my classics challenge, so this one is ticked off my list. In this story, the very wealthy George Cloat gets killed by a bombing during the London Blitz, and he leaves behind his very young widow, which makes her the only heir to his entire fortune, much to the dismay of the rest of his family. A rumor surfaces that the widow's first husband is actually still alive, which would mean that possibly the money could go back to George Cloat's immediate family. So obviously this is a lot about inheritance and complicated family relationships, and what's interesting is that Poirot doesn't come in until I think the last third or so of the book. Initially, it is not about a murder. So this is not really to solve George Cloat's murder. It is about the first husband maybe being alive. What I enjoyed about this book is actually the first 2/3 where we explore the family dynamics and what kind of interest everybody has. And then also there is the topic of one of the female characters after the war having changed, and the discussion of, does she still want to be a stay-at-home wife to a farmer, or does she maybe want to venture out into the world, be independent and do something different? In the end though, this was not one of Poirot's best. If you asked me for a recommendation, this is not the one I would pick out. But as I am interested in reading through all of the Poirot novels, I am still glad that I picked this up, just not one of my favorites. Next, upon one of my sister's recommendations, and she actually lent me her copy, I read Terror by Ferdinand von Schirach. So this is a play, and the setup is very simple. This takes place in a courtroom during one session. In its core, this is a provoking thought experiment designed for the reader or whoever watches the play, where you're being asked, is it okay to kill 164 people in order to save 70,000? What happens before the courtroom scene is that a terrorist gets hold of a plane with passengers on it, with innocent passengers on it, and they steer the plane off to crash course into a football stadium, or sorry, soccer stadium, where 70,000 people are currently present. And a military fighter pilot, against his orders from his superiors, just decides to send a missile towards the passenger plane, killing 164 innocent people to save the 70,000 people in the stadium. And now he is in court being trialed to see if he's going to be convicted for a murder or not. What is very interesting about this is, and this is not a spoiler, there is no definite ending. There's no definite outcome. There's 2 endings within this story, because you as the reader are supposed to make up your mind on your own. And even when you watch the TV version of it, like the actual play, they also have 2 endings filmed for it. So the author doesn't give you a resolution. It's literally up to the reader to decide what is right and what is wrong, which makes this play really great for a classroom setting. I think my sister said that they actually voted on this in class, or for a book club. I made up my mind on it, but I am not going to tell you my opinion. I want you to read it yourself. In my mind, I think the arguments for one side were a bit stronger than the other, but it could also be because I'm biased, because that was the side I voted for in the end. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars just because in the end the dialogues, I think they could have been written better, but I also recognize that this is supposed to be a play. It's supposed to be acted out. So have a read, but let me know in the comments down below if you already have an answer to the question. Next, I read a 4-star book called A Boy Called Bat by Elena K. Arnold. I randomly picked this up from my library app because I saw it as a suggestion. It looked interesting to me. It is middle grade, I would say specifically younger middle grade. And this is about a boy called Bat who is on the spectrum of autism. His mom is a vet and one day finds a little skunk kit. And they decide to take it in and take care of the skunk kid for at least the first stages of its life. I personally wouldn't be able to judge if Bad's character is realistic in the sense that he does behave like a boy who's on the spectrum of autism. But I've seen reviews from people who can judge it, and they said that it is a very realistic depiction. I genuinely enjoyed reading this book. It had obviously a lot of heartwarming moments, and I genuinely, in the end, wanted to know what happens next, like if he can keep the skunk kid or not. So I actually did go and right away reserved the next 2 books because it's, I think, a 3-book series from the library, and now I have those 2 physical copies here. I already finished the second one, but that's for my March wrap up. And yeah, I just really like this. If you're into middle grade at all, then I can really recommend you this series. Next up, with 4.5 stars, I have In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. This is a nonfiction memoir by the author. This is just incredibly unique. I've never read anything like this before. So this is about her former abusive same-sex relationship. So this is not a light topic, although the format gives you the content in bite-sized pieces because this is told in vignettes, but in a way that I've never read before. So with every chapter, you look through parts of her life through a completely different lens. So meaning some of the chapters' names are something like The Dream House as a film noir, The Dream House as a physical place. You honestly have to read it yourself to understand and experience this, because I thought this was such a brilliant idea. It is so candid and just well told. A very important part of this book, and also the reason why it did not read self-indulgent whatsoever, the author gives us the bigger picture of what was happening to her. She gives us the context of abuse in queer relationships throughout history, throughout the media. I did note down some examples because I couldn't paraphrase it any better, so I'm just going to read them out to you. Our culture does not have an investment in helping queer folks understand what their experiences mean. Another one, her talking about herself in the past, is, I didn't know any queers. I did not understand myself. I didn't know what it meant to want to kiss another woman. Years later, I'd figured that part out. But then I didn't know what it meant to be afraid of another woman. Do you see now? Do you understand? Another is, women could abuse other women. Women have abused other women, and queers need to take this issue seriously because no one else would. I was just right now trying to remember why I gave it only 4.5 stars and not 5, but I remember now it was because I could have read more. It could have kept going for me. What I would have also been interested in is to read about her healing and then finding her way into this new, healthier relationship she's in now, or at the time she was writing this book in. All in all, this is a must-read for the nonfiction lovers out there, and please add this to your nonfiction November TBR if you're starting to build your list. And finally, this was the easiest 5 stars for me, is Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. The nonfiction is really dominating my list. This book is about none other than the huge Theranos scandal that happened like, what, 10 years-ish ago now? Elizabeth Holmes was finally convicted. So John Carreyrou is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist. I still vividly remember seeing the news about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos right when she started making headlines, and I vividly remember thinking to myself, wow, how cool is it that a female is the top of Silicon Valley right now, and that she's in the news doing this amazing stuff for humanity and creating this huge innovative method for blood testing. I also do remember seeing the news that Theranos was in fact just a scam, but what I didn't realize at that point was how huge the scandal was. If the name Theranos or Elizabeth Holmes doesn't ring a bell, her mission was to, instead of having to draw a huge vial of blood like usual for all of your testings, to create this technology that with just a small finger prick, with a drop of blood essentially, to do all the same tests. Theranos went through multiple rounds of funding. In the end, I don't know how many billions of dollars were squandered during this whole ordeal. They were the startup in Silicon Valley led by a woman, so it was a huge deal. The reason I picked up this book is because I watched The Dropout on Disney Plus. That was an amazing show. Afterwards, I needed more, so that's why I listened to the audiobook, and I was not disappointed. As someone who cannot stomach true crime that has to do with murder, with homicide, I just can't do it. This was the perfect true crime story for me. Now to the dollar amount in Canadian dollars that I saved, and this is before taxes, by using my library card. I saved $94.70. Take this as an encouragement if you don't have a library card yet to sign up with your city, or to use yours if you already have one. Thanks for listening to me. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for the support if you have, and let me know if you've read any of these books or which one of these made it onto your TBR. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next time.